but by default, wanting to be happy and to feel good as the number one guiding principle in my life, more than financial success, career, relationships, network, whatever else. It turns out those other things get a lot easier when you're happy.
All right. Welcome to another episode of Lessons Via Leaders, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship and hear from the leaders who have lived it. We're not here to sugarcoat anything. We want to hear the raw and real stories of success, failure, and everything in between. Join us as we talk to some of the best and brightest founders, uncover their secrets to success, and share their lessons learned with you all. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, tea, cafecito, or whatever beverage you enjoy, and get ready to learn from some of the best. Lessons Via Leaders is brought to you by the Local Leaders Collective, an organization that helps founders and entrepreneurs take their business and personal lives to the next level through peer support. If you're interested in joining the LLC or learning more, check out the website at www.thelocalleaders.com. All right, with all that being said, let's get right into the episode.
All right, awesome. Chad, thank you so much for joining us, man. Appreciate you being here.
Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, we're stoked to learn more about you and your background and Supermind and how you got into this whole journey. But yeah, I guess we'll talk about lessons you learned along the way. We'll get into all that. But yeah, first, maybe spend 5 minutes on you and what made you start this company.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So started my career working in finance. I spent 6 years mostly in New York City, working investment banking, private equity.
You born in New York too? Or?
Born in Maryland.
In Maryland.
Yes. And had a sense of wanting to be an entrepreneur throughout those years. I was lucky enough to get into a top business school. And before enrolling, I decided to go on a backpacking trip by myself to Southeast Asia. 2 things happened on that trip. One, I was really inspired by all the travel experiences that I had and this sense of global unity, that there's so much that we have in common in places like Far East, where you may not expect to feel that sort of connection with others. And I also enrolled in a 10-day silent meditation retreat, which was my first experience with mindfulness, which was amazing. I just dove right in, 10 hours a day.
Wow.
10 hours. What is it for our listeners that don't know and for this host that doesn't know? What is a silent meditation?
So essentially you go and you live at the monastery. You
Okay.
eat 2 vegetarian meals a day. You wake up at 4:30 and you meditate all day. So
Wow.
it's 10 hours broken up into time blocks. And then at night, there's an instructional video from the person that created this method called Vipassana. And they teach you everything that you need to know. And then you go deep within. It's silent, and it's actually noble silence, which means you're not supposed to even acknowledge the other people that are there. It's very much a singular personal experience.
So imagine not speaking for 10 days. This is basically what it is, right?
Wow.
You're in complete silence. So by day what do you start feeling like, oh my God, I can't do this? And then by day what do you realize, okay, I could do this?
There were many realizations throughout, and there was a particularly difficult moment on the 8th day where I felt that I had gained so much from the retreat that I just wanted to leave. But there's this kind of expectation that you don't leave early. So there's a little bit of a strict enforcement of that. And it took me into this weird spiral of anxiety and stress of why can't I leave? And it made me question everything. And it turns out the lesson they were teaching on that day was very resonant to that experience that I was having, which is the more that you crave something, the more that there can be suffering attached to that. It's kind of a Buddhist principle. But yeah, there were times when I was looking at myself in the mirror, like moving my mouth. Can I still talk? What's happening here? My mouth is like kind of harder to move. You know, the muscles in your lips and tongue is unused for 10 days. So when we start talking on the last day, it's like so much stimulation, like, whoa, I'm having a conversation with someone. I haven't done this in a while. You're almost like, it almost feels like, yeah, you're just very, you're kind of getting used to interacting again.
This stuff. I also have read these folks that are doing these darkness meditations and retreats, like no light. What have you seen those? The one that they just like go in complete darkness.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So the darkness retreats are crazy because apparently that allows or facilitates the release of DMT naturally within the brain. So it can be a very intense psychedelic experience just by isolating yourself in darkness for like 3 or 4 days. It happens naturally.
Wow. Crazy.
It's really
Wow.
interesting.
Yeah.
I read Young Pueblo's book Lighter, and he talked about his retreats, his silent retreats, and it's something I've always been really interested in. So I just read about it, but I still haven't taken the plunge, right? I'm at that stage. So what led you to decide to go to a 10-day silent retreat? Were you working? Were you taking a break? Like, was this before, and that's what inspired Supermind?
It was a big part of the inspiration, and it was a time where I had a few months off to travel before enrolling in classes in business school, and it was somewhat of a spontaneous decision. I hadn't really planned to do this, but I talked to people that I met on that trip, and they spoke very highly of the experience. And I'd always been curious about mindfulness because I tended to have a very active mind, and sometimes would have racing thoughts, and sometimes would have anxiety, and would overthink things. So naturally, the idea of meditation seemed like it could be a good antidote to that for me. And I had this extra time, so I said, screw it, I'll just dive right into the 10-day full immersion.
That's not usually how people dive into
Without-
mindfulness.
without
That's like the whole.
knowing-
Usually you download an app.
Yeah.
I was not dipping in a toe. That was before the
No,
app.
you
Yeah.
went
That
like
was
you just went
2013.
full in.
Yeah.
And so I came back from that trip and was inspired by the travel experiences, the sense of global unity, and I had some mindfulness experiences. And I initially started a different company. I started a travel business, and it was in Cuba, which is interesting because this was at the opening of diplomatic relations. It was while I was at Harvard Business School. I was wanting to do something different. And I ended up living in Havana for the summer for 2 months, which was fascinating, and was inspired to start a travel company working only with the private sector, not with the government, which was a very unique way of doing it that I hadn't really seen many others doing. The origin story for Supermind, which is about a year into that, into running that company, I started to experience a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety related to the challenges of the business. The lack of banking infrastructure, the lack of a network that we could work with, the geopolitical challenges, and all of the pressure that I put on myself coming from that Wall Street banker mentality, type A, overly perfectionist, comparing myself to my colleagues and classmates that went to Harvard that were making all this money doing private equity and hedge fund, and I'm sitting in a Wi-Fi park at 2 a.m. trying to pull together an itinerary, screenshotting photos off of Airbnb to get this company off the ground. So a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. I had a panic attack at one point, which was so weird. I'm just at a conference and my body's kind of like going into fight or flight, which I didn't understand. It was very challenging to deal with mentally as well. And so at that time, I met my co-founder in Supermind, and he offered me the opportunity to do a brain mapping. I went in for the brain mapping, and what he saw based on my brainwave data and what he was able to tell me based on that data was so accurate in describing my experience at that point. He said, you've got severe anxiety, you've got severe stress, you're not sleeping, you're probably experiencing burnout, low energy, fatigue. And so I was convinced to sign up to go through sessions with him and the program that he had created. And I did that. I did 10 sessions consecutively over 10 days. And by the end of the 10th session, I had resolved those issues 95%. I felt freaking amazing. It was a life-changing experience for me. And I could see on the brainwave graphs a 90% reduction in certain areas and frequencies associated with the fight or flight response. For example, there's the delta frequency, which is in the subconscious. And when I'm sitting in a room with my brainwaves being measured, that frequency was showing all this activity, like spiking, which indicates that some part of my system believes there's some threat to my safety. There is nothing going on. I'm just sitting in a room with my eyes closed, breathing deeply. Clearly, something has gone out of whack here, and I've gone into some hypervigilant state, overly stimulated, overly stressed. And after the 10 days, I saw a 90% reduction. So there's a before and after on our website, which is actually my brain at that time. All this activity in the before, and in the after, it's this nice and smooth line. And what happens when we're able to rebalance the energy in our subconscious is that we free up all this mental energy for whatever we want in life, whether that's just enjoying life, being calm. There's also a cognitive resource to this that we are able to reclaim and recapture when we're not throwing our energy away in that survival mode that's no longer serving us. In the modern age, we are safe. There's no lions, tigers, or bears.
I feel like I'm always in that mode of anxiety and, constant, maybe subconscious fight or flight, even though like it's not really the case,
Yeah, I think I relate to that too. And I think we're all collectively trying to figure out how to balance those thoughts and be present.
Yeah, especially in a modern day society where there's just constant not impulses, but input.
Yeah, that's just our stimulation
Right, exactly.
all over. And it's easy to, even your thoughts become like sidetracked, and there's just so much that you try to grasp it all. And that's where it becomes overwhelming and can cause anxiety. So that's really interesting because you went through that retreat prior to this. So you had some level of understanding on how to find peace and balance. And now fast forward, you're experiencing it. So the journey of, healing or meditating continues. What was your mind telling you while you're facing this? And it's like a duality. You're like, but I just learned this and I'm here repeating it again. And why is my mind going crazy? How were you able to uncover that through this data?
It's a continuous journey. And as we're saying, there's a lot of stimulation in society. There's a lot of habits and patterns that are easy for us to fall into, moving back into limiting beliefs around survival mode or stress or the need to do things to physically survive, which is something we can shift. And so having done the Vipassana, that gave me some awareness around the power of meditation. But what we're doing with Supermind does go beyond that in our ability to self-regulate. So the meditation Vipassana is more observe. I get really good at observing what's happening. Eyes are closed 10 hours a day. Start observing all this stuff going on in my body that I wasn't even aware of. It's really cool. All these vibrations, I feel my whole body lit up. There's a sense of oneness. There's amazing things that can come from that. But that passive observing doesn't really help me in my daily life when I'm at a computer. So it's a different modality in that sense. And what we do and what I learned was how to self-regulate the nervous system and teach my nervous system and my subconscious to stop creating the stress. And that's part of the aha unlock that we're bringing, which is that part is part of us. It's meant to serve us. And if it's automatically giving us stress energy, fight or flight, survival mode, there's a reason for that, which is we're probably thinking about that stuff a lot. And if we're focusing on all the things that could go wrong and all the hypervigilance, we're actually training our nervous system to feed that back to us automatically in our subconscious. By directing our focus to what could go right, to all the things that are amazing about our lives, to the things that we want, we're creating new neural pathways and training the subconscious and the nervous system to give that to us as our new default. This is a concept that's been around for a while, and we're bringing much more science and data to it because we can measure it. So it's not just, think positive. This is, if you follow this exact pattern of thoughts and do these exercises, we will show you 40, 50, 60, 70% improvements in your brainwave data that you can feel and understand and correlate it through your own subjective experience with the objective validation that the data provides.
So let's talk about the product of Supermind and how it really works at a high level. Like when somebody's like learning about this for the first time, what do? They sign up and they go through a series of questions and like tell me about the overall product offering of Supermind.
Yeah, so it's a device.
Yep.
It's a hat.
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful hat. It's very unlike other EEG devices and headsets that are medical in nature that look weird. It's something you can have in your home every day and feel good about putting it on every day.
It is something that you get shipped. It's something you provide each person. Yep.
So you would buy it online, we ship it to you, and you open the box, you have a hat. The hat has biosensors embedded within the lining of the hat, and those sensors read your brainwaves. And so through connecting, syncing it to our app, you're able to quantify and measure and score your mental wellness in a new way, which is a bit like the HRV companies like Whoop or Fitbit, or the continuous glucose monitoring companies, Levels Health. It's biometric quantified self data that we provide on the final frontier, the human experience, the brain, the mind. And we also provide biofeedback integrated with mindfulness exercises to improve your scores. So there's two parts of the experience. There's the measurement, the quantification, the tracking of our mental wellness through the scoring, which is based on our brainwave data. And then there's the curation of a personalized 20-minute daily mental fitness practice. This is for people that have dipped a toe into mindfulness. They've tried the apps. They get overwhelmed with the hundreds of different options. They don't know where to start. They don't know if it's working. So we're showing the progress. We're tracking. We're quantifying. And we don't have a library of all these different things. We are curating each next exercise based on what your brainwaves show that you need. And that's part of that personalized biofeedback experience. The way that we're able to uniquely train the nervous system is using biofeedback. And this is a way of understanding what's happening in our brains. It's like a mirror. Can't see inside our brain, right? But through biofeedback, we get information about what's happening in certain areas. And we play sounds that are a pattern that mirror the brainwave activity and reward you when you're moving in the right direction. So we combine the biofeedback sound guidance with these positive thinking exercises, essentially, which are visualizations, affirmations, breathing. We've pulled together all the best mindfulness techniques and direct people to do those simultaneously with the biofeedback. So it's a very actively engaged process. 20 minutes a day, 20 minutes to self-mastery, quantified, curated. It's very effective.
And how often are people measuring their brain waves in your program? Like in HRV or like my Apple Watch, for example, it's constantly monitoring it. Like, are you recommending people do this daily, or is it weekly? Daily.
Yeah.
Okay, in the morning or in the evening?
Whenever works for them.
Okay.
Or 3 to 5 times a week. It's analogous to physical fitness in that way. The more you invest in it, the more you'll get out of it.
Makes a lot of sense to me because we spend so much time and it's so common for you to measure your heart rate and things like that. And the mind is so equally as important, right? And yet,
or more.
Yeah, or more, right? And there really
and
hasn't
we don't
been,
pay attention.
We don't.
Yeah.
It's just like autopilot, right? So it's very interesting.
And it'd be good to measure if what you're doing is working, right? Or if it's evolving, because we tend to not step back and take a look at our growth and just get frustrated because we're not, we're repeating something that we thought we'd worked through. Mm-hmm. And so I struggle with that on my, on a personal level. I'm like, sometimes I'm good, but I've done so much work. And then I have to remind myself, it's not about how much work we are doing it. And then how would you have reacted to this a couple of years ago? And then I don't even have to think about it. It's like very clear to me that I'm different now. But I think tracking mindsets, I call them the negative ants, right? Like the negative, automatic and negative thoughts. And so when they're coming in and I'm like, well, this isn't really my thought. And so I have a better understanding at the thoughts now. I get less frustrated, but it's like constant practice. And I'd love to quantify that. Sure. I'd love to see those results and to see that improvement.
Yeah. And it's a continuous journey. So we can always be gentle with ourselves when challenges come up, knowing that we're doing our best in every moment. So some of that mindfulness content also gives us new tools to work through anything that comes up, even when you're not using the hat. Mm-hmm. It's like being your own best friend and having the awareness of those thoughts. Like we were saying, like these thoughts are on autopilot. I'm aware of what I'm eating. I'm aware of what I'm watching. What am I thinking about?
Power of now, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my favorite books, Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, right? It talks all about that, being an observer of your thought, not an autopilot driven by the thought, right? Like, why am I thinking that? Like looking down at the thought pattern versus like
Exactly.
being overcome by the thought pattern.
You are not your thoughts.
Right.
We are not our thoughts. We are the observers of our thoughts.
Right. Would love to, share with some listeners here in the spirit of, the show's called Lessons Via Leaders. So like you have a lot of obvious like takeaways that you've learned over the years through meditation and your journey for Supermind on like mindfulness, and like you seem incredibly grounded. What are some like mindfulness lessons that you've learned over the years that, folks that are, incredibly stressed out, can learn from, whether it's practical things of like 1, 2, 3 counting to and taking a deep breath, or just things over the years that you feel like, wow, I wish I would have known this 10 years ago. That would have saved me a lot of pain and stress.
A few things come up.
Yeah.
Feeling good is the work.
Mm.
How can we prioritize being happy every day as our guiding principle? Mental health is more important than revenue for entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we believe that for sure.
Yeah.
100%. Here at the LLC, that's like the reason it was created, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
I found that when I prioritize the way that I feel, the state that I'm in, it makes solving problems much easier. So there's a new awareness of the grinded out, stressed, let me run through walls, can be effective. It may not be as effective as being calm, relaxed, and happy. And holy crap, I just got this really good idea, and that just changed the trajectory of the business, which I would not have gotten if I was just stuck in grind mode. Mm-hmm. It's it is a challenging shift, not one that happens overnight. And there's a continuous spectrum of when to go into the sprint mode and when to step out of it. Mm-hmm. So I try to, and I cultivate that as a tool. How can we use these as perspectives and tools to apply one in a certain situation? But by default, wanting to be happy and to feel good as the number one guiding principle in my life, more than financial success, career, relationships, network, whatever else. It turns out those other things get a lot easier when you're happy. Mm-hmm. Another thing that comes up is sleep. So I'd like to offer a little sleep meditation in the spirit of what we've spoken about and being able to guide our nervous system and train our nervous system to do what we want. We are the observer of our thoughts. We are also able to create thoughts. If I think about sleep, I can imagine myself laying in bed. I'm creating that with my intention, with my willpower. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes when we go to sleep, we're not intentional. There's a mental side of sleep. Whoop and others are measuring the physical sleep performance. There's a mental sleep performance that we teach. And it connects to what we were saying earlier around if I'm not intentional, these thoughts are just happening. I'm in fight or flight and I didn't quite realize it. My subconscious is feeding that to me because it thinks it's keeping me safe or it's doing something that I want. And that can happen with sleep too. So what we teach people is that we can actually tell ourselves how we want to sleep. We can self-direct our sleep. The way we do that is with a few simple steps. So step 1 is deep breathing. I like to do it sitting up in bed because if I'm laying down, something about my body kind of goes into sleep mode and I'm not fully ready because I haven't mentally prepared and directed myself. So I sit up on the headboard and I just take deep breaths. Breathe in for the count of 3. Hold for the count of 3. Breathe out for the count of 3. And as you do that, you're calming down your nervous system just through the breath. Cannot understate the power of breathing. Breathing is the key to everything in a sense. It can unlock so much depending on how far you go with it. And it's hard because when your body's feeling that stress, it's hard to breathe deeply. You're contracted, you're breathing shallow in many ways. But
how important is sleep to mental wellness?
It's extremely important. There's a Huberman quote, it was on Twitter that said, sleep is the best nootropic, sleep is the best healer of trauma. Sleep is the best.
Mhm.
There were like 5 bullets, and you were like, okay, this is a hack.
And what is the recommend? It's still 7 to 8 is kind of like the sweet spot. You're right.
7 to 8.
That's like my one thing that there's no compromising in. No.
Non-negotiable.
Like it's just like I have to sleep.
Yeah.
And I like people ask, are you a morning or night person? I'm like, I'm like an in between. I
Right.
can't tell you morning or night. I just need to know how, like if I'm gonna work late, I'm gonna wake up late because I need to sleep. And I struggle so much when I don't get the right amount of sleep because I'm like high energy and I don't drink coffee or caffeine or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So like my little bit of sugar is if I have one of these LaCroix, and that's like that's it, right? And so I'm like at the highest energy all day, and I'm like so empath, so like consuming energy all the time. I get home and it's like I don't even exist. And so that sleep for me is so crucial that if I wake up without it, it's like I don't even want to be around anybody. I don't want to talk to anybody, which is so rare for me because I love to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like so I feel like that to me, it's like I have to tell people I'm sorry if I can't be there at 7 a.m. in the morning for you because I need to be there for me.
One of the biggest things I'm trying to work on is actually, again, if it's 7 to 8 hours, like oftentimes we think it's like, okay, if I get into bed by 10, then I could wake up at 6. But no, if you get into bed by 10, that means you're probably not going to be asleep for another 30 to 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So you're never getting enough sleep if you think of it that way. You need to be in bed kind of like an hour before you hope to be deep asleep. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out a new process for just like getting mentally ready.
That
actually go to
breathing
sleep.
is
that sounds key.
essential. Yeah.
So the breathing is great, and then the other steps are telling yourself it's time to sleep.
Right.
And there's different mantras you can use. It's time to sleep. 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 You are telling yourself. You are telling your nervous system. You are directing your system to shut down for the day. You can also say, give me 8 hours of rejuvenating sleep. And I like to repeat these. And as I say them, I can start to feel my system is listening. It's a really incredible thing when you first realize, wow,
True.
I can self-direct how I sleep. Shouldn't it be like this? I just hit a switch and I go to bed.
As opposed to thinking at 10:30 at night, you're looking at the ceiling being like, I can't believe they said that to me earlier today, right? It's
It's not
it's a
working.
different vibe about going to bed.
You're
yeah.
like, just go to sleep already.
It's a process.
It is, yeah.
And we're training our nervous system. So there may be resistance, there may be spikes of energy, there may be reactions. But there's the self-directing, it's time to sleep, it's time to sleep, it's time to sleep, it's time to sleep. And then the last step is imagining yourself waking up feeling really, really well rested.
What's your view on psychedelics and this wave of this resurgence or energy around psychedelics in some of the things and topics and themes that you're speaking about? I'm just curious to get your point of view.
It's very relevant to the consciousness conversation,
Yep.
to the awareness of what's happening in our subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
I believe psychedelics have a lot of healing potential. I believe in their healing potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe they'll be part of a brighter future for mental health and wellness for everyone because of how much they can facilitate significant changes in a short amount of time for things like major depressive disorder, which research already shows great benefits for. I think they're also to be taken with a lot of caution. And I see that that's not happening so much in many ways. It's a little bit kind of cavalier, like, hey, let's just take some psychedelics and see what happens. And I want to just caution people that these are very strong medicines and they should be treated in a ceremonial, reverent way. Whether that's with a doctor or it's with a mindful community, I would support both. And I hope that they gain more acceptance and awareness in our society at large because I think they have tremendous therapeutic potential. We've thought about how we could integrate psilocybin or ketamine with our treatment as they could have independent and complementary effects on neuroplasticity, but it's not core for us and it's not necessary.
Right.
We just end up being at a lot of the same conferences as we have a new way of looking at mental health and wellness. It's in the alternatives category. It's not therapy. It's not medication. It's something else. So I have a lot of respect for people that are pushing the movement forward, and I wish them the best.
Yeah, totally. And I've heard from a lot of folks that kind of dip their toe in that water. You know, there's other things that they've done, such as breath work, that is just as impactful and has led to some big unlocks as,
Oh yeah.
you know.
I have had great experiences with breath work and shocked at how it could give you that same experience. And then there's something to be said about that. It's
Right.
like, oh, I don't need this to create that experience. It's within me.
Right.
It's always with me. And so I think the thing with the psychedelic industry is that it requires education. And for a long time, there wasn't any education. What was out there was like, people doing it at home, hiding, not talking about it, or doing it recreationally. And so now it's coming out, and there's like more education around it. And I think that's sparked. I mean, the pandemic required some shift,
Something new. Yeah.
some shift. And
Yes.
if you've noticed, the wave over the past just year,
Right.
even year alone, it's been just incredible. And so I think it's the easiest entrance for people to get that like massive adoption, because you can try to do it slowly with apps and other applications, and sometimes people don't grasp it until they've lived something so shocking that just tells, oh, okay, it's not easy to tell someone, hey, let's go to a 10-day silent retreat. It's not easy to say to someone, hey, you're going to breathe for an hour and a half in the breath work. What? Like, I'm not
It's
gonna,
work, too.
Yeah, it's work.
Yeah.
And so I've surprised my family and say, okay, guys, I'm getting an experience for you. And little did they know they were going to be sitting in a breathwork session. But if I would have told them too much, they wouldn't want to do it. When they were there, they were like, oh, okay. And they ended up just having the most amazing experience, wondering, I didn't think I could sit. How long were we breathing for? And the guy
You
said,
lose track
yeah,
of
you were
time with
breathing
breath work.
for an hour for sure. And so, we did it with LLC, but we did like a 20-minute one that felt like all of 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So everyone's like, we were not breathing for 20 minutes. And he's like, you were breathing for 20 minutes. Just like you didn't think you can sit in that cold plunge
Right.
for 4 minutes, some members. Then everyone's like, no, I've been here for 20 seconds. No, it's already been 2 minutes. You can stay longer. And so that, when you create this expectation of what it's going to be like. And I think that's the biggest barrier into kind of wellness, like different modalities.
And breath work is a direct connection to the brain, right? When you're doing the breath work, right, that's kind of that feeling of euphoria that you're getting and that unlock, right? Because it's going directly to,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
Well, this has been incredible.
Yeah.
I think we got to get wrapping up
Yeah,
soon.
for sure.
It's when you're having a good
This is good.
conversation, you never want to end
We could
it.
talk about this all day. But for folks that are intrigued about what they're hearing with Supermind, how could they get involved, and what's the best way for them to get started? Just, is there a website they can go to? Or?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So our website is supermind.us.us, and we do have a clinic here in Wynwood. So we are offering sessions in a on-site physical location, which is the basis for the technology and the science that's been developed over the last 10 years. That's where I went through and had my experience initially. We've had about 2,000 people go through that process. So we're open if people want to come in, check it out, do a brain mapping, do sessions while we're developing the hat. The hat is not ready for sale yet. That's part of our plan that we're developing now. And so that would be a good way to have a personal experience with the technology. And for anyone that's interested in collaborating, if this resonates on any level, we are more than happy to talk more about it and expand the ecosystem, whether it's someone that wants to improve their performance, their mental health, someone with an MD or a PhD that wants to get involved on the science side of things, or an organization that's looking to help to minimize employee burnout. This can be very effective for that as well. So yeah, our doors are open, and we welcome any and all outreach, and are very excited to share more of this with the world.
Awesome. Well, we'll drop all that information in the description so folks can check out Supermind. And Chad, thank you for joining us today. This was awesome.
This was great. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming in.
All right. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Lessons via Leaders. We hope you enjoyed today's show and gained some valuable insight from our guest. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review and subscribe to stay up to date on our latest episodes. That goes a long way. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Lessons via Leaders for behind the scenes looks and exclusive content. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and creating positive change in the world. We hope you have an incredible, incredible day, and thank you again.